So let's begin this session by invoking the blessings of the Lord. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. It's you who are giving us strength to continue on this particular journey of ours. So today we've been through 4 sessions before this, and the sessions that we've been through have been very interesting. Each of them have taken us through a different phase. Today we are going to be talking about the attitudes that enable you to reach your goal. So yesterday we did talk a fair amount saying, should you actually, does the Gita actually say that you shouldn't have a goal at all? No, the Gita doesn't say that. The Gita obviously says that you must have a goal and that you must work towards your goal. There is no doubt about that. So today our entire focus is going to be on this issue, on what are the attitudes that enable you to reach your goal. And there are 2 sub-themes to this. How can you be focused on the journey and not the destination? This is a very, very important aspect of the Gita. And this is something that we need to spend a little bit of time and understand and figure out for ourselves as to how this can happen. And the second part, which is we will continue with what we said yesterday, the power of non-attachment to the fruits of our action. So there are these 3 themes that I've integrated into one talk today. And I'm sure that at the end of the talk, we will have some very interesting learnings that will actually take place. So yesterday we looked at great detail about significant action. We talked about the 4 types of action. We talked about inaction, reaction, insufficient action, and significant action. And of course, the highest, which is significant action without any attachment to the fruits of your action. We looked in great detail about that and how if we can detach ourselves from the entire fruits of the action, then we can actually start powering our way ahead in life. So if you recall that beautiful verse of chapter 247, which is one of the most often quoted verses in the Gita, especially when it comes to karma and nishkama karma, basically, the 3 kinds of karma that we look at, and this is more about nishkama karma. And when Krishna actually turns around and tells Arjuna, karmanye vadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachina, ma karma phala hetur buhur, matves sango stava karmani, which is you have authority over the actions, but never the fruits. Let your motive not be for the fruits of action. Let your attachment not cause inefficiency. And here is the crucial part. You see, unfortunately, we all look at the first part of the statement, and I'm very grateful to my good friend Ananta Bhatt, who's also here on this particular session, for making me aware of one very important point. That is, we always quote the first part of this saying, you have authority over actions, but not over fruits. But it is actually the latter part of the statement, latter part of the verse that takes an enormous amount of meaning, which means that if you allow your motive to cause inefficiency, if you allow your attachment to cause inefficiency to your action, then you have a serious issue that is coming up. So this is something which is very, very important, that we need to have no attachment. And this attachment that we have to the fruits of our action should not cause any inefficiency. So we will spend a little bit of time today on this particular subject, and I'm grateful to Ananta for pointing that out. I'm also grateful to another dear friend, G.P. Sudhakar, for sending me a very interesting interpretation of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how he thinks that, how the article that he sent to me actually looks at this entire concept of figuring out how we can actually, find a way of moving up that particular ladder. So today I'd like to begin this talk by, giving a small dedication to Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda was perhaps one of the greatest Indians that lived, in the modern times. Okay, there have been many other great people who lived before him, but Swamiji was perhaps one of the most interesting people who lived in the modern times. He was the first person who went and reclaimed on a world platform the superiority, the spiritual prowess of Hinduism. He is the person who went and, when he went and when he addressed the entire, in Chicago, the Parliament of Religions, and he talked about brothers and sisters of America, he completely changed the dynamics of the way people looked at India, of the way people looked at our spiritual prowess, and he is to a large extent responsible, I believe, for reclaiming this prowess. So let's just spend a little time on what Swami Vivekananda says about this entire non-attachment to the fruits of your action, which we will take first. He talks about something very interesting. He says, what is working without a motive? Is it at all possible for us to work in any situation without a motive? And he has got a very interesting interpretation of Karma Yoga, which I'd like to share with all of you. His interpretation of Karma Yoga is very interesting. He says yoga is nothing but concentration. Just think about the beauty of what he is saying. He says yoga is nothing but concentration. Okay, so if there is some way that you can be concentrated in the action that you are doing, which is nothing but Karma Yoga. So look at the depth of his statement. That is, Karma Yoga is nothing but concentration in action. And if you can look at that, if you can work in that with that concentration, without an ego, that I am the doer, I am doing something, I am creating something, then Swamiji is talking about a very interesting concept, saying, how can you actually commit yourself to a certain kind of an action, and how can this action be with you all the time? So let's remember this. Karma Yoga is concentration in action. Okay, so if you can be concentrated in what you're doing, look at what will really happen otherwise. So can we immerse ourselves in the action that we do? Can we have a completely concentrated state of the mind? Is it possible to lose all our consciousness in that particular action? And it is possible for us to do that. Just look at again the Mahabharata. When Arjuna is in the process of releasing the arrow from his bow, he knows the fact that the arrow is going to hit someone and there will be a result that will take place. But at this point of time, his entire concentration, his entire focus, his entire consciousness is on releasing the bow with so much of efficiency, releasing the arrow with so much of efficiency that that arrow is going to find its mark. And that is what Swami Vivekananda is trying to tell us, saying Karma Yoga is nothing but being completely immersed in the consciousness. Bring all your consciousness into the action that you're doing at this point of time. Let's look at a few examples. Whether it is M.S. Subbalakshmi rendering one of her absolutely divine renditions, she's completely immersed in that particular song. Will you and I appreciate that song? Of course we will appreciate the song. Does she know that you and I will appreciate the song? Of course she knows that you and I will appreciate the song. Will you and I turn up for her performance? Of course she hopes that we will turn up for her performance and buy the ticket. But that is not the point. The point is that when she is singing, when Yesudas is singing some of his Krishna bhajans, he just transports you into divinity. And he transports you into divinity because he is completely immersed in that particular song at that point of time. Look at a painting. If some of you have had the privilege of looking at some of our famous Indian painters like Raja Ravi Verma, and the beauty of those paintings, it is timeless. They are classics. So there are so many examples that abound of people being completely immersed in what they are doing. And that is Karma Yoga. That is, if you can get so totally immersed in what you're doing at this point of time, and not worry, yes, there is going to be a result. There is 100% there is going to be a result, because any action that you take will have a result. There is no doubt about that. But at this point of time, can we be so totally immersed in what we're doing? And that's something which is very important. Look at a painter painting a wall in a house. He's just a humble painter. At this point of time, as he applies his brush in the house, he is so totally immersed in that particular painting, in the act of painting the house, in the act of painting the wall in your house. He's completely immersed in that. And he's looking for those small, tiny flaws. And, he's doing it again. Now, that is Karma Yoga in action. You can see this all around you. Like a lady who's preparing a beautiful dish. Whenever we get into the kitchen and preparing something, I know for a fact that the dish that you're preparing is going to be a great dish. But when you're pouring out the dosa, you're doing it with so much of consciousness, with so much of concentration at that point of time. Are you going to get the perfect dosa? Maybe. Are you not going to get the perfect dosa? Maybe. Who knows? But the fact is that when you're pouring that out, if you can be completely immersed in that action, that is Karma Yoga that is working for you. Like a farmer tilling his land. He's tilling his land in the hope that there is going to be a rain and that he can plant his seed and he'll get a bountiful crop. But at this point of time, the way he tills his land is very simple. He is completely focused on the act of tilling his land, like a software engineer writing his code. When he is writing the code, at that point of time, he is so completely immersed in the act of writing that code and creating something that is going to enhance the efficiency. All of these are examples, like a humble typist preparing a bill without any mistakes, without any errors, making sure that when he is typing that particular bill, that he is going through every line very carefully and making sure that every clause, every issue is covered in that entire bill. So ladies and gentlemen, around us, there are hundreds and thousands of examples that we can see of people doing Karma Yoga, of people being completely immersed in the activity that they're doing right now. And that is something that we need to learn. That is something that we need to keep in mind. That if we are totally immersed in what we do, then obviously the kind of actions that we do are going to be truly blessed. And therefore the results that you're going to get will be also very good. Remember, you have no control on the kind of results that you will get. But if you can be totally immersed in what you do, you're obviously going to get some fantastic results. So look at yourself, look at your life. I am sure even in your own life, there are so many examples available of people who've been so totally immersed in what they're doing. And I have my good friend Kishore Jagirdar on this particular call. Kishore runs a fantastic forum called the Vision Karnataka Forum. And in that particular forum, Kishore is doing absolute Karma Yoga in trying to help people, in trying to help small entrepreneurs come up in life. He's a true Karma Yogi in action. Yesterday, we had a friend of mine called Ravi Vadlamani, who's Rotary International Director nominee. And Ravi is also doing some amazing work in the rural areas and trying to provide water for people. A true Karma Yogi in place. So think of when you yourself were completely immersed in what you did, in whatever action that you did, and just look back. The amount of satisfaction, the amount of happiness, the amount of peace that you found when you were so totally immersed in what you were doing. Take those instances in your life and start seeing if you can multiply them and trying and seeing if you can make that a part of your life on a more sustainable basis. Not just one episode in the morning or in the afternoon or in the evening, but make sure that these are things that are strung through the day in what you do. And you will have Karma Yoga in action. So this is something that we need to figure out, saying Karma Yoga is nothing but concentration, is but focus in action. And if we can be completely focused in what we do, there will be a result. And that result will be an outstanding result. That result will be a great result. That result will be a fantastic result. No doubt about that. But you please enjoy this process of what you're doing. And therefore, let me get to the next theme that I think is extremely important in what we are doing. But before we get there, just think for a minute and do the small exercise for yourself and say, in whatever I'm doing today, like I said yesterday, if we can put down a to-do list, if we can put down today saying, here are a few things that I do, and I'm so totally immersed in what I do. Like if my good friend Dr. Nair is performing a surgery at this point of time, he's so totally involved in that entire surgery. Like if you're a gynecologist and you're involved in delivering a child, then you're completely immersed in the act of producing the child. If you're a goldsmith producing a fantastic gold ornament, then you're totally immersed. So take a look at your life and find out what are those times, what are those kinds of activities, what are those kinds of actions in which you get completely lost in what you're doing and you're enjoying yourself. You could be listening to music. You could be seeing something on the television. But if you're completely immersed in what you're doing, that is complete Karma Yoga in action. Keep that in mind. If you are going to be able to look at Karma Yoga in this way of concentration and consciousness in action, then you will start enjoying the journey. You see, there is a journey that we take to reach a particular destination. Each of us looks at that particular journey and says, how can I make this journey more enjoyable? What can I do with this particular journey and make sure that this journey that I've embarked upon is a journey that is going to get me to my destination? So the fact is that when you embark on a journey, there is going to be a destination. There is no doubt about it. So if you get ready today and you decide that I'm going to go to my office, then obviously you will get to your office at some point of time. If you decide to get ready today and say, I'm going to go and visit my parents or I'm going to go and visit my relatives, then you will go and visit your relatives. So every journey, there is a particular destination that there is a fact about. So you will get where you want to go to, okay? But is it possible for us to figure out a way of enjoying this journey? Can we actually do something by which we can start enjoying this particular journey that we are each of us on? Let me give you a small example that I was quoting to another group some time back. Imagine that your family is telling you that, look, let's go for a holiday. Okay, I mean, okay, there is going to be no holiday for the next couple of months, but still, just imagine that your family has said, let's go for a holiday, and everybody in the family says, well, let's go to Kashmir for a holiday. And you say, well, fantastic. So the whole family is very excited that, you know, you go to Kashmir, you did your bookings, you've got everything sorted out, you've got your travel plans in place, you've got your ticketing in place, you've got your hotels there in place, everything is happy. And people in the house are so excited. The fact that, you know, you're taking a holiday, you're going to Kashmir, it's something that they're looking for, and people are very excited about this whole journey. And right from the time you leave your house, just imagine, for some reason, you start fighting with the taxi driver. You think this guy is cheating you. You think he is not going by the proper direction that he is supposed to take. And you get upset with him and say, why are you going by this direction? Why don't you go by that direction? You're going to the airport or you're going to the railway station or wherever you're going headed for, and you start fighting with him. You reach the particular, railway station and you fight with the porter. And you tell him, no, why should you charge 100 rupees? This is too much. It's only 2 small bags. And you get into an argument with him. And then at the end, the porter says, go to hell. I'm not going to take care of your bags. You do what you want. And then you've got to carry those bags on your own because your kids are too small. Your wife is saying, I can't carry these bags. So you are at great discomfort. You take those bags and you huff and you pant and you rave and you rant and you get into the bogie or you get into the booking counter in the airport. And throughout the journey, you're being unhappy. You're not being very satisfied. Throughout the journey, you're unhappy. Throughout the journey, you're fighting, you're constantly bickering, you're saying, this is not right, the AC is not good, the fan is not working, the water is not cold, the food is not being served properly, and there are so many things that you can come up with by which you're unhappy. And then finally, you get to Kashmir. And you reach Kashmir, and you tell your children, fantastic, now we are in Kashmir, go and enjoy yourselves. By that time, I'm 100% sure that your children, your wife, or your spouse is possibly turning around and saying, why did we even leave Bangalore? We should have stayed back in Bangalore. At least if this fellow would go to the office on a daily basis, we don't see him for 8 or 10 hours, and life is so much more comfortable. How can you enjoy Kashmir at that point of time when you've just not enjoyed the entire journey? It is the journey that is more important than the destination. Kashmir, replace Kashmir, substitute it Talk about anything else that you want to do. You're writing a presentation today for an important client. You're cooking some food. You're making something because you've invited guests home. Whatever it is, you're developing a PowerPoint. You're writing some amazing code. Just substitute Kashmir with that particular activity. And just take a look for yourself and see, are you enjoying what you're doing at this point of time? Because when you embark on a journey in life, the fact is you will get to a destination. That is guaranteed. There is no question about it. There will be a point B that you will reach in life when you embark from point A. But when you get there, are you going to be a happy person? Are you going to be a sad person? I see people conducting marriages, and there are so many problems that they create for themselves along the way. So many altercations that they have, that at the end of the marriage, the end of the marriage ceremony, there is only a great relief saying, "Chalo, ho gaya, let's get out of this thing." Is that the way that you want to live life? Is that what the whole thing is all about? And the entire Bhagavad Gita is about that, saying that enjoy the journey. Please make sure that you enjoy this particular journey, so that when you are doing karma yoga, and when you're saying, I am going to be conscious about the work that I'm doing right now, then that destination becomes so much more interesting in life. And this is what Swami Vivekananda says: to work without a motive, to work unattached, bring the highest bliss and freedom. Just think of this. To work without a motive. That there is a destination, yes, but right now let me be focused completely on what I'm doing. To work without a motive, to work unattached to what will happen afterwards, is going to bring you the highest bliss and freedom. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Karma Yoga. So if we can adopt this particular thinking in our life and turn around and say that, look, this is what we need to do. Is it possible for us to actually keep practicing this kind of a thinking in whatever we do in our life? There is a particular quote in chapter 5, verse number 7, where Krishna actually talks about this. It's beautifully explained in the same way. I mean, this is the beauty of Hindu philosophy and Hindu thought, that the same thought gets expressed in different places in different ways. The same thing was explained in Srimad Bhagavatam in the 11th chapter, or even in the Mukundamala, which is written, which is a very, very beautiful statement, which is a very beautiful shloka that is made. It says, Kayena vacha manasendriyeva buddhyatmanava prakriti sabhava karomi yadyat sakalam parasmai narayana iti samarpayami. Which means, whatever I do with my body, my speech, my mind, my sense organs, whatever I do using my intellect, my heart or my mind, I do for others. And that's the critical thing. I do for others. I don't do it for myself. And I surrender all this at the lotus feet of Lord Narayana. Look at the beauty of this statement, that whatever I'm doing in my life, can I actually do it in such a way? Can I adopt this particular attitude? Can I make this attitude a part of my life? That I am doing this, I've been given this task, I've been given this wonderful opportunity today to serve people. I've been given this opportunity. This is a unique opportunity that has been given to me, that whatever I'm doing, whether I'm writing a code, whether I'm writing a PowerPoint, whether I'm doing a business development plan, whether I'm doing some cooking, whatever it is that I'm doing it with a way that this opportunity that I've given, I'm doing it to serve others. Can we imbibe this particular attitude in our life? Because if we can bring this attitude in our life, then a lot of our challenges will just disappear and wither away. So what is this whole question called attitude? Now, we examined that thoughts lead to action. So an attitude is nothing but a habit of thought. Attitude as a word is unfortunately misunderstood, and people use it as if attitude means a bad attitude or a negative attitude. That is not so. An attitude can also be an extremely positive attitude. It can be a very enabling attitude. So we looked at thoughts leading to action. So if there is a set of thoughts that we can make a part of our mental makeup on a daily basis, then that becomes our attitude. if our thought process is enabling, if our thought process is going to help us get to what we want to get to in life, then that is going to be the attitude that we're going to reflect in life. So, can you make it a habit to entertain positive thoughts all your life? Yesterday, we talked about the canals of the mind that get clogged. And if those canals of the mind get clogged, then the energy that is unleashed by a positive thought process can possibly go and get blocked and get dissipated away. And we talked about the three problems: living in the past, too much of anxiety about the future, or too much of restless energy in being involved in what we're doing right now. But if you can make this positive thoughts a habit, that whatever you're doing at any point of time, if you can make that something that you're going to be living with, that you're going to be practicing on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, on a minute by minute basis, then that is going to be the attitude that you will require to help you to get to what you want to get to. So if you can make positive attitude, if you can make enabling attitudes, if you can make enabling thoughts your enabling attitudes, then that is where you go. Let me share another secret with you. We looked at strengths and weakness, I think, in this third session or the second session of the third session. And if you can look at those strengths that you have and make that your attitude, you don't have to look outside. You can just take a look at the strengths that you've got and say, here are some beautiful strengths I have. Can I make this part of my daily thought process? Can I make this part of my attitudes? And there you've got something interesting. So if you can pull that piece of paper out that we wrote some of your strengths on, I'd like to do a small exercise, a practical exercise with you as we go along. Okay. So, where do you apply these attitudes, right? Where do you apply this particular strengths? We talked about reaching the goal that we've set for ourselves. Now, you can have any goal that you want. Krishna never talks about not having a goal. All that he says is that, look, do your action in a spirit that you don't have to really worry about what is going to be the end result of what you're going to be doing. But Krishna never talks about the fact that you should not have a goal in life. That is a misnomer. That is a mistake that we make. That the Gita teaches us to be goalless. No, on the contrary, the Gita keeps telling us that you have a higher purpose in life. You must set a higher goal in life. So, how do you reach your goal in life? What do you need to do? Where do you practice these attitudes? Through the Bhagavad Gita, there are so many small nuggets that we can get as to where you need to do this. But from a modern context, from a today's context, let me tell you that you need to apply these attitudes. Just imagine, there is a triangle that you've drawn, and in the triangle at the middle is saying that, my goal. Now, there are three places that you need to apply these particular attitudes with. One is the way you manage yourself, the way you look at yourself, the way you talk to yourself, the way you are with yourself, when you're silent, when you're thinking, when you've got me time. What is it that you're having a conversation with yourself at that point of time? So the first set places is, if you want to reach your goal, is to find out how are you managing yourself. The second part is how are you managing the people with you? How are you managing your family? How are you managing the colleagues that you work with? How are you managing the customers that you've got? How are you managing others in life? And the third part is how are you managing work? So just imagine there is a particular triangle, and in that triangle you've got these three things. One is how are you managing self, how are you managing others, and how are you managing work. So these attitudes that we're talking about, these strengths that we're talking about, that I'd like you to try and see if you can do this on a daily basis, these are strengths, these are attitudes that you need to bring to achieving your goal on a daily basis. So does the Gita talk about some of these attitudes that we can look at on a daily basis? It does. There are many places where Krishna keeps talking to Arjuna about what is the qualities of man that he believes are important and that will make him dear to him. There are many, many places that he talks about. There are, for instance, I think in chapter 10 he talks about it, but I found in one particular place, which is chapter 13, from verses 7 to 11. And he talks of a whole host of qualities of man that are very dear to him and that he believes are qualities that will help. To my mind, these are nothing but thought processes that each one of us can imbibe. While there are different interpretations, let me share with you what I believe are those interpretations. The first, of course, the first and the most important thing there is to be completely devoted to the Lord. That is making the fact that you have a certain set of belief, you have a certain set of faith. Remember what we talked about 2 days ago, that man is what he is of his faith. What he becomes, what he believes in. And therefore, you must have that faith, you must have that belief that whatever I'm doing, I'm devoted to the Lord. And that, I think, is the underlying principle. The underlying principle of this whole I can philosophy that we talked about, that if you start thinking I can, that should come from a certain belief in the Lord, that should come from a certain devotion to the Lord. So that is one. But having said that, here are a couple of very interesting things that he talks about. And I'm just going to, jumble them up and put them together so that we try and make some sense. I'll talk about each of them. There are approximately 18 of them. So you can pick and choose what you think match with the strengths that you've got. The first thing that he talks about in managing self. So I'm going to first talk about self, then I'll talk in terms of others, and then lastly I'll talk in terms of how do you manage work. And all these are from, as I said, chapter 13, from 7 to 11. You can look it up in any of the books that you have. There'll be some slight variations in the words, slight variations in the translation, but it doesn't matter. Go above that, go beyond that, and try and see how it can be made relevant to today's world. So here is my take. The first he talks about is humility. And this is such a very, very important fact, that if you're not going to be humble, if humility is not part of your armory, you're not really going to get anywhere. Why? Because if you're not humble, if you don't have humility with you, then you will get no inputs in life that are going to make any sense to you. So one is humility. The second is modesty. He says, look, make modesty a part of your life. The third is simplicity. We make our lives far too complex today. We need to try and figure out how can we make life more simple. And I think this pause button that all of us have hit in life is a very, very interesting time when we've rediscovered simplicity, that we don't really need so much in life. We can actually manage with much lesser. Purity. Making sure that the thought process that you get is something which is pure. Absence of ego, that I am not the doer. I am not someone who's going to, I haven't done this, getting rid of the lower ego that we talked about, I think 2 days ago. Self-realization, self-control, being in complete control of what you're saying. Solitude, what we now talk about in me time. This is something that, Krishna talked about it so many years ago, thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, when in the Gita, when he talks about the importance of solitude and maintaining me time. Overcoming any perception of limitations. We operate with so many limitations. And of course, in the Gita, he talks about the limitations of birth, of death, of pain, of maladies. But if we can turn that around to today's context and say, can we overcome all the limitations that we have? So here you have it, about 9 interesting attitudes, and you can pick and choose which of them resonates with your strengths. Humility, modesty, simplicity, purity, absence of ego, self-realization, self-control, solitude, overcoming perceptions of limitations. These are the 9, he says, are useful when you're when you're managing yourself and figuring out how can I get ahead in life. Then he moves to others. How do you manage others in life? And look at some of the ones that he shares with us. Causing harm to none. This entire win-win theory which has now come up and is becoming so popular, okay, is this causing harm to none. Patience, tolerance. People will make mistakes. I keep telling people, saying, children and employees will make mistakes. But will you be the first to know, or will you be the last to know? And that's the secret of being a good mother or a good father or being a good boss. That your employees will make a mistake. Your children will make a mistake. That is their birthright. But are you going to be the first to know or are you going to be the last to know? And that is some quality that comes from tolerance. Non-attachment. Of course, he in the Gita talks about non-attachment to children, wife, home, etc. But look at it from a larger perspective, saying non-attachment, don't develop an attachment to the work that you're doing. And worship of a guru. He talks about the fact that each one of us needs to have a guru who we can revert to. Substitute the word guru in today's context, take it to coach, take it to mentor, take it to a trainer, and you've got somebody that is going to help you. And finally, he talks about work. And here is something that he talks about very interestingly. He says equanimity, sthita prajna, making sure that you're absolutely the same in pain or pleasure. Don't get carried away by what happens, by the circumstances, by the reactions of people. Develop equanimity, because that will lead to a lot of peace of mind. People will react in different ways, but don't get worried about that. Consistency, renunciation, searching for truth. Look at the beauty. See, so he talks about these four: equanimity, consistency, renunciation, searching for truth, as attitudes that you can use to manage the work that you do. And so let me just quickly repeat. From a self perspective, it is humility, modesty, simplicity, purity, absence of ego, self-realization, self-control, solitude, overcoming perceptions of limitations. From managing others, causing harm to none, patience, tolerance, non-attachment to children, wife, home, etc., etc. Worshipping of a guru, acquiring a coach. In terms of managing work, he talks about equanimity, consistency, renunciation, and a search for truth. All of this are going to help us. These are the kind of attitudes that we need to inculcate that will help us go forward. So just to get into a conclusion mode, we live in something called a VUCA world. Okay, VUCA is an American terminology. VUCA is nothing but volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. And in this world, to get ahead, especially from today's context, we need to develop vision, we need to develop understanding, we need to develop clarity, and we need to develop agility. So you replace volatility with vision, uncertainty with understanding, complexity with clarity, and ambiguity with agility. The timeless principles of the Bhagavad Gita will help us do just that. To develop the vision that Krishna keeps talking about, to develop the understanding of the higher purpose that we have in life, to develop a certain clarity in thinking that you are not the doer, and to become extremely agile, to be on the move, to do things, not to get into significant action. Look at how the principles of the Bhagavad Gita are so relevant even in today. Vision, understanding, clarity, and agility. The fact that we need to do all of this can go ahead. So, can you practice all 19? Maybe not. Pick and choose some. Pick and choose a few. Work out saying that, look, I'm going to choose these two for managing myself, this one for managing others, and this one for managing people, but this one for managing my work. Fair enough. But try and pick a couple of attitudes that you think will help you get on with your path. So today, more than at any point of time, in this situation that we find ourselves in, the world needs what I call wisdom workers. If you were to practice these attitudes on a daily basis, you will become what is known as a wisdom worker, because that is what Krishna also talks about, that you need to move into a wisdom. And he very interestingly brings the whole fact of wisdom, renunciation, meditation. And he says, how can you do all of this believing that I am not doing it, but I'm doing it as per a grand plan? So, as Swami Vivekananda very nicely says, work like a master, not a slave. If you can practice these attitudes on a daily basis in your life, then what happens is that you become a master. Life will not lead you by the nose and drag you wherever it goes, but you will actually take life the way you want it and take it to the place that you want it, because these are attitudes that are timeless, and these are attitudes that will work for you. So ladies and gentlemen, if you love the work that you do, you will do the work that you love. Keep this in mind. If you love the work that you do, you will do the work that you love. As we said, we may not be in control of what we do, but we have complete control on how we do it. So start loving the work that you do. Make work like a master, not like a slave, because a master works with a lot of love. Okay? Adopt the right attitudes. Enjoy the journey. Krishna keeps telling us about the journey. Enjoy this journey, and results bound to happen. But don't get so attached that it causes inefficiency in your life. Thank you very much.